I absolutely can talk about it. I love talking about my Adam and Eve theory. So, based on how the story of creation goes in Genesis 1 versus how it goes in Genesis 2, I came to the conclusion that there's no way that these are the same creation stories, meaning that God created two batches of humans. So, let's look at Genesis 1 first. Once upon a time in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then God says, "Let there be light," and separates it from the darkness, calling the light day and the darkness night. And God said, "Let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water." So God made the vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it, and he called the vault sky. Then God creates the land and the seas and the plants and the trees. Then God makes two great lights, one to govern the day and the other to govern the night, meaning the sun and the moon. And verse 18 says again that he separated the light from the darkness. Then God creates the sea animals and the birds, and then he creates the land animals. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image and our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. Yes, God says "let us," meaning God is not alone when he's creating everything. The jury's still out on who he's talking to, but that's another video. We can talk about that later. So anyway, God blesses them. He tells them to be fruitful and multiply. And that's basically the end of Genesis 1. Now, on to Genesis 2. The heavens and the earth were completed, and God blesses the seventh day. Then we get to Adam and Eve. Now no shrub had yet appeared on the earth, and no plant had yet sprung up, for the Lord God had not sent rain on the earth, and there was no one to work the ground. Then the Lord formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. So here's our main discrepancy, because back in Genesis 1, God creates humans on the sixth day after he created the plants and the trees on the third day. But now in Genesis 2, it's saying that there's no plants, and then God creates man. Moving on, in verse 8, God plants the Garden of Eden and he puts the man there. Then he makes the trees grow and we get the first introduction of the tree of life and the tree of knowledge. Then God puts the man in charge of the garden, tells the man not to eat from the tree of knowledge. Then God decides to make a helper for the man. So he brings the animals and the birds to the man, and the man names them all. But for Adam, well, now he has a name. No suitable helper was found for Adam, and so God puts Adam to sleep, takes one of Adam's ribs and makes the woman, and they're both naked. And that's the end of Genesis 2. Eve is also named by Adam, but not until chapter 3, which is after the thing with the tree happened. So just to recap, in Genesis 1, God says, "Let there be light." He creates the sky, creates the land, the seas, the plants and the trees, creates the sun and the moon, creates the sea creatures and the birds, creates the land animals and created mankind. Versus Genesis 2, no plants had yet sprung up, and then God creates man by himself. He plants the Garden of Eden, he brings the animals and the man names them all, and then God puts the man to sleep, takes a rib, and makes the woman. So do you see how I came to the conclusion that I came to? It does not sound like the same creation story at all. Some people try to argue that Genesis 2 is a retelling of Genesis 1, like it goes into detail about how God created the humans. But no, because like I pointed out before, in one story God makes the plants before he makes the humans, and in another story he makes the humans before he makes the plants. Also in Genesis 1, God creates man and woman together and he tells them to be fruitful and multiply. But in Genesis 2, God creates man first and then he's looking for a helper for the man, and so he brings the animals first. But that's not enough for the man, and so God puts him to sleep and then makes the woman. And God never tells them in Genesis 2 to be fruitful and multiply. In fact, Adam doesn't sleep with Eve until after they're kicked out of the garden in chapter 4. Yet another reason why I believe it was two different creation stories is because of chapter 4 with the story of Cain and Abel. After Cain unalive his brother and God basically sentences him to wander the earth, Cain is worried about somebody unaliving Cain himself. And then God says, "No, I'm going to put a mark on you so that no one will unalive you." Why? Why would Cain be worried about somebody would unalive him if it was just him and his family on earth? It wasn't just him and his family on earth. There was a completely different batch of humans that God made in Genesis 1, the ones that God told to be fruitful and multiply. Yeah, they started multiplying. This also explains why Cain found a wife in verse 17 who later gave birth to Enoch. His wife was part of that first batch of humans. Now that's my theory. That's my textual evidence. You can decide if it makes sense to you or not, but it makes sense to me. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to see more deep dives into fascinating biblical topics, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Stay tuned for more content like this.